getting outside. This whole week's going to be great. All right, I'm here to read a story to you guys. This one is called The Sons of the Dragon King. I looked through it briefly, and it's going to be about some ancient Chinese legends and kind of explain some things about why things are today. And you guys are fifth graders, right? All right, very cool. I remember being in fifth grade a long time ago. All right, we start out. In ancient China, it was said that the Dragon King had 9 sons, each one immortal, each one very different from the next. As they grew older, each of the sons moved to a different region of the country to find his place in the world, far away from the Dragon King's watchful eye. Alas, it was not long before unsettling rumors made their way to the king. The first came from the tutor of his first son, Bei Shi. Your son does nothing all day, nothing at all, but challenge the peasants in competitions to see if anyone is stronger than he is. This does not seem befitting the son of a king, the tutor exclaimed. Indeed, it did not. Indeed, such behavior from the son of a king could not be tolerated. Bei Shi was meant to discover his talent and make a contribution to his country. So the Dragon King decided to visit his son to set things straight. Disguised as a common peasant, he traveled to the region where Bei Shi lived. There he saw Bei Shi carrying an enormous weight on his back, racing another man who also carried an enormous weight on his back. "You see," cried the tutor, "this is how your son uses his time." The Dragon King was dismayed. He was about to call out his son and scold him when he suddenly had a thought. Perhaps Bei Shi would do well in a position that used his great strength. He beckoned Bei Shi to him and told his son of his idea. Bei Shi, pleased that his father had recognized his great strength, readily agreed. And to this day, Bei Shi may still be found carrying the weight of large columns that support the roofs of China's great buildings. So Bei Shi today in China now holds up the weight of the big palaces in China. It's kind of a cool legend. Now to the next son. The Dragon King had just returned to his palace when an old servant from the home of his second son, Qi Wen, ran into the throne room. "1,000 pardons, your highness, but I must tell you that your son, Qi Wen, does nothing all day, nothing at all, but stand upon his roof and stare into the distance. This does not seem befitting of the son of a king," the servant exclaimed. Indeed, it did not. Indeed, such behavior from the son of a king could not be tolerated. The Dragon King slipped his peasant disguise back on and set off for the region where Qi Wen lived. As he approached his son's house, he saw someone standing high on the roof, gazing intently into the distance. It was Qi Wen himself. The king watched and watched, and his son never moved, except to slowly turn his head back and forth. He seemed to the king to be extraordinarily lazy, and the king was about to shout out to him when he suddenly had a thought. Perhaps Qi Wen was suited for a position that made use of his watchfulness. He called his son down from the roof and told him of his idea. Qi Wen, pleased that his father had recognized his hawk-like eyesight, readily agreed. And to this day, Qi Wen still can be found at the tops of buildings, essential searching the distance for potential danger. So he is now the watchful eye on top of the rooftops, protecting China. Before he could return home, the Dragon King was nearly knocked down by a group of villagers running toward him with their hands covering their ears. They had come from the direction of his son Pu Lao's house. "Your son," they cried, "he does nothing all day, nothing at all, but make the most monstrous noises. This does not seem befitting the son of a king." Indeed, it did not. Indeed, such behavior from the son of a king could not be tolerated. The king hurried to his son's house, where Pu Lao bellowed from within. The king thought for a moment. Pu Lao really didn't have a bad voice, it was just terribly loud. Perhaps he was musical. So the king covered his ears and went into the house to tell his son of his idea. Delighted, Pulao began practicing more earnestly than ever. And to this day, Pulao is often seen adorning musical instruments, no doubt assuring that their sound will be loud and true. Pleased, the Dragon King stopped at the home of Bian, his fourth son, on his way back to the palace. There he watched from a short distance as Bian resolved a dispute between two merchants by carefully weighing their goods on a scale. Wise and eloquent, he settled their disagreement and sent them on their way. Clearly, the king decided Bian must serve the cause of justice. He spoke to his son, who readily agreed, pleased that his father thought him wise. And these many years later, Bian may still be seen supervising the doorways to the great prisons, ensuring that only the guilty are locked inside. So he keeps all the bad guys in. Make sure the innocent ones stay out. As he returned to the palace, the Dragon King was stopped by the caretaker of his fifth son, Tao Tie. Ah, good king, I do not like to spread rumors, but your son does nothing at all, or does nothing all day, nothing at all, but fuss about in the kitchen. This does not seem befitting of the son of a king. The Dragon King frowned deeply, then threw his disguise on once again and rushed toward Tao Tie's home, prepared to tell him it wasn't befitting behavior for the son of a king to spend his day in the kitchen. Then he saw a long line of people outside Tao Tie's house, standing patiently with bowls in their hands, and he breathed in the most magnificent aroma. He joined the line, and once inside, he saw Tao Tie stirring a savory soup for all to share. The people, already eating their soup, seemed very pleased indeed. The king immediately knew that Tao Tie must play a role in the nourishment of the people. Upon hearing his father's idea, Tao Tie was so pleased that his father appreciated his cooking that he gave free soup to everyone for the rest of the day. And today, Tao Tie may still be found protecting the places where food is prepared and served. The Dragon King's sixth son, Ba Sha, lived fairly close to Tao Tie, so the king decided to visit him before returning home. On his way, he heard someone splashing in the great river. As he drew nearer, he saw that it was his own son frolicking in the water, spraying streams of it from his own mouth. The king was shocked. What could he make of such a son? He called to Ba Sha, who swam so swiftly to him that the king was surprised. He hadn't known his son was such a strong swimmer. That made him think, perhaps such a good swimmer would do well, seeing to the safety of those who use the kingdom's rivers and lakes. Ba Sha splashed water right onto his father in delight when he told him of the plan. And ever since, Ba Sha has perched on bridges crossing the country's water, vigilantly watching over those who pass by in their boats. When the Dragon King returned home, one of his guards told him he had heard a rumor. The villagers in his son Yazi's province were afraid of Yazi. Although Yazi lived in a remote part of the country, the Dragon King once again donned his disguise and made his way to his son's home. As he approached, a servant came running from the house, while Yazi shouted at him from the door. "Oh, most revered king," cried the servant, "the seventh son does nothing all day, nothing at all, but shout and scream and yell and holler. This does not seem befitting of the son of a dragon king." Several villagers nearby nodded. The king looked at Yazi's angry face and wondered what to do with such a son. He was about to scold him when he realized that with his temperament, Yazi would be well suited for a position in the military, where he could direct his anger at the enemy. When he told this to his son, Yazi hollered, "Yes, sir!" and marched off excitedly. And today, Yazzie still may be seen emblazoned on the weapons that strike fear in the country's enemy. We got a picture of a pretty cool axe. Unlike Yazzie, the Dragon King's 8th son, Shawnee looked fearsome but had a kindly heart. So the king was surprised when a monk from Shawnee's province caught up with him on the road to tell him that the 8th son did nothing all day, nothing at all, but play with fire. The Dragon King sighed a great sigh, and set off to visit Shawnee. When he arrived at Shawnee's home, his son was tending to a flame that he believed would burn eternally, while patiently explaining to young children its importance. The Dragon King thought hard and decided that such a kind heart and such passion would serve Shawnee well in a religious role. Shawnee was delighted that his father approved of his interest. Since then, Shawnee has been found embellishing the pots and stands that hold incense during the religious ceremonies. Before anyone else could come up to him with another rumor, the Dragon King took it upon himself to visit Chiao Tu, the 9th son. He found his son's home surrounded by high walls, and when he knocked at the thick, heavy door, no one answered. A little girl passing by shook her head. 9th son does nothing all day, nothing at all, she told the king, unless he does it from behind the walls of his palace. She bowed low. Well, such behavior was hardly befitting the son of a Dragon King. The king knew. So he banged and banged and banged again on the door. When the door opened, the slightest crack, the Dragon King forced his way through, prepared to scold his son. What he could do with a son with such a disposition? Then he thought, perhaps in some way, Chiao Tu could serve to protect people from unwanted intruders. Today, Chiao Tu can be found guarding the entryways to people's homes and businesses. With great relief, the Dragon King returned home. He took off his disguise and smiled for the first time in a very long time. For now he knew he would hear no more unsettling rumors about his 9 sons. And indeed he did not, for each of his sons happily undertook the role he was most suited for, a role befitting the son of the Dragon King, and through the ages has never ceased to honor his royal heritage and responsibility. The end.